God, Randy. Go, Randy.
Oh, man.
You're slacking on the music, Bob. Oh.
I wasn't expecting the visual from Corey on this. This was a surprise. For those who are being regaled by Corey's performance, that's also Lily Eskelsen Garcia and Randy Weingarten's, at least faces, on the graphic. And this is Random Assignment, everybody.
How did you get their pictures like that? Did you have to edit those, or did you find pictures
it's called
of
the
them?
Magic. It's called the magic of media. All right, that's enough of that. All right, hey everybody, it's Random Assignment. I'm Bob Bowden. That's Corey DeAngelis. Corey with the Reason Foundation. I'm with Choice Media. So welcome back to the most unique event in all of the world of education policy, the weekly Random Assignment live stream and podcast, which sometimes happens at 5 p.m. Eastern, sometimes 6 p.m. Eastern, but always Wednesdays. So we got that much going. How you doing, Corey?
Hey, doing pretty well. I'm sorry, everyone. It was my fault that we were delayed by an hour again today, but there should be a segment coming out on One American News Network a little later with Liz Wheeler about what Bob Bowden's about to talk about with teachers threatening strikes.
Yes. Well, look, it's like this week was like all these other weeks where we just say, a couple of days before the show, it's like, oh, there's just very good 3 or 4 things we can talk about. And then as we start to prepare the show, the next story comes and the next story comes and the next story comes. And by the time we actually go live, like right now, it's like, holy moly, we're exploding with subjects to talk about. But let's talk about I guess we'll start at the top, which is this issue of, as you see there, National Teachers Union, that is the American Federation of Teachers, supporting strikes over reopening plans. And if what you mean by that is, gee, what strike could Randy Weingarten mean that they're supporting? The answer is any of them. Like if any local decides that they think it's not safe enough because of whatever reason they want. Now, maybe they are really using that as some excuse to strike because they really have an ulterior motive of something else. Whatever. The whole point is the National Union doesn't care. They're going to support, as long as they say the words COVID-19 or virus or protection or social distancing, or what, as long as they refer in any way to preparation for the virus, it doesn't matter what the real reason is. The National Union says, we will back you, local striking union. You go. We got your back. So that was the story. Go ahead.
And they have 1.7 million members, just as a reminder for everyone. There are about 3.3 million teachers in the U.S. So this is a large segment of the teaching population here. And look, Bob, I actually don't mind if people want to strike, if laborers want to strike, or if certain businesses don't want to reopen. The problem is when they get to hold your money hostage and fail to provide you with those services. Like if a Walmart employee strikes and they don't reopen, it's kind of inconvenient, but it's not devastating. I can take my money elsewhere. I can go to H-E-B, Whole Foods, or Trader Joe's. And so why not call for some type of voucher program to fund the students if the teachers strike? I mean, it shouldn't be contingent on the strike. It should be always, but especially if teachers are going to not provide the service or if the schools aren't going to reopen.
And what you're describing is exactly why hero liberal president FDR did not support public worker strikes. He was all for workers in all kinds of ways, but not in the realm of public workers. And so, in a scenario where there's not competition, which is exactly what you're talking about. So we have here the union. Let's see. The AFT union leaders approved the resolution Friday, announced it at Tuesday's group convention. We actually are going to have a clip in a second of their online AFT convention. And so they're gonna provide lawyers, for example, legal assistance from the national union to any local that wants to strike for any reason, but at least uses the words COVID-19 at the time they do strike. They're going to help them with all this, and it almost seems to me, Corey, that there's kind of a principle, especially lately with the unions, which I thought wouldn't have happened after Janus. So for most of our viewers and listeners would know, the Janus decision in 2018 said that teachers can quit the union now in all 50 states, not just the roughly half of the states that were right to work states, without paying these so-called agency fees, which is 80 to 90% of the dues anyway. Basically, everywhere in America, teachers at traditional public schools could completely walk away from the union after the Janus decision. And I would have thought at that moment, unions would have become more accommodating to different points of view, realizing they can't just cram down this one ideology of how we're going to run everything. Out of fear, they might drive people away. Like, I don't know, maybe conservative teachers or Republican teachers or something like this. This appears to be not the case. It seems to have doubled down, ironically, or in a way, at least I don't understand. Post-Janus, the unions have become only more strident, only more angry. It's almost as if every morsel of vitriol that Randi Weingarten can spew, she believes, only makes them stronger. That just the madder and angrier they get about everything only serves their interests. It seems to be her strategy when I watch her speak.
Look, and I wouldn't have any issue with this if you could take your money elsewhere. I mean,
I know. Yeah, you just said that.
Why don't we see grocery store workers striking right now? Why do you think there's a difference? I mean, why aren't daycare workers striking right now? Why is it, only in this one sector where they get to have your money, regardless of whether they're providing you with the service? Are you seeing these strikes? It's just crazy what we're seeing.
So that's why this episode is called The Safety Dance. They're saying, oh, it's not safe to... meanwhile, the same teacher that may have been in Walmart earlier that day, or might have been in Target the day before, or might have been at the drugstore, the Rite Aid or whatever drugstore the day before that, or all these, even restaurants these days, and in many states, they're eating indoors, and in some states only outdoors, but at least they're every single teacher, I'm sure, has gone to a supermarket in the last 99% anyway, in the last month. And yet they are convinced that there'll be too much death associated with this if they go to school. But anyway, so we wanted to talk. So Randi Weingarten had this online conference, and she got up and spoke. And I was just mentioning how strident and angry she is trying to be. And here's that clip.
School districts are immobilized by lack of funding and lack of space, by windows that don't open and bathrooms without soap. The average school will need at least $1.2 million, or $2,300 per student, to open its doors safely. Assuming no other budget cuts, that's at least $116 billion to have the resources to protect the health of students, staff, and families, to have the supports to meet every child where they are, and to advance every child's learning and development. But of course, in this recession, there have been budget cuts, draconian cuts. So in this recession, the only source for that funding is the federal government. How dare President Trump tweet, in all caps, schools must open in the fall, with no plan, no funding, and no idea what he's talking about.
How dare
he want the schools to open?
How dare he tweet schools must be open when there's no funding? Did you hear what I said, Corey? What she said? No funding. All right. You know what no means, Corey?
It means zero. Last
no
time I
means
checked.
Zero, zilch, nada. I think I'm quoting from the Three Amigos movie, but I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I mean, she's sitting here saying, "Yeah, just give us more money, or we're not going to reopen, and we're not, we're going to go on strike." And look, I'd be okay with that again, but give me my money back if you're not going to provide me with the service. That's the problem here. That's the main problem. They have so much power in the education system, and families are powerless right now, and that's the problem. And I think a lot of people are seeing that. They're seeing that the unions are, using the pandemic essentially to get a lot of unrelated stuff like defunding the police and police-free schools and all these other things that they're calling for, Medicare for all, wealth tax. It doesn't seem to be about the safety of the students. So it's just crazy.
But she just said no money, Corey. That's why I said zero, zilch, nada. They've been given no money. And yet, if you go to the first link under that video, Corey,
what is it?
Look at this. Wallace blog. Look, the CARES Act. What? Wait a minute. What? Scroll down on that a little bit. We're looking for
$13 billion or
Wait,
something?
hold on. Wait, go down to that one. Go to a subpoint A. Subpoint A. That's 30.
There it is.
13.5. Wait, didn't Randy Weingarten just say no money?
Hey,
wow,
Bob.
That's weird. Because it's like in April or so, they passed billions of dollars to go to the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund.
Yeah, but
that's weird because go ahead.
Facts don't matter, Bob, when you're just trying to get more money for your constituents.
What? Wow. What is that? Maybe 13.5 billion is no money. I don't know. That's at least sounds like some money, doesn't it? Anyway, well, at least I guess she just maybe forgot about that one. But go to the second link there.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know if you've seen this yet, but
okay, but before we go to that.
What is this?
The one this is a yahoo.com link I'm going to next. Yeah. It's the that's it. Look at this. Second stimulus. Wait a minute. Second stimulus package, July 27th. Isn't that about 2 days ago?
They haven't even spent the first stimulus package money.
A second stimulus package. You see the story though on the.
These websites suck. But here, yeah.
There we are. Yeah. Scroll down a bit. Look at this. The legislation. We're looking for the part. Go down a little lower. Yeah, it's a little lower in the story. Keep going. There's a part more where it talks about schools. Keep going lower. No, it's below stimulus
checks.
Story continues. Yeah.
Everybody cares about their stimulus checks, right?
Yeah. But wait, school funding right there. Look at this. School funding.
$70 billion for K through 12 schools.
Wow. 70 billion. Wait, this is the second stimulus. Wait, Randy just said no money. That was on the clip. Do we have to review, girls and boys, what was on the clip? Zilch, zero, nada. She said, how dare Trump tweet the schools must reopen when he's given there's no money. No money. Now, this is legislation. This second one, of course, I guess hasn't been passed and signed yet officially.
Mm-hmm. But this is the starting point. I mean, the Democrats' bill is much higher than the 70 billion, right? Isn't it like 400 billion or something, or 200 billion?
Yeah, but there was already a first bill. There was already a first bill that was passed called the CARES Act. So so no money. Gee, I'm awfully confused by that.
Well, and she's calling for 116 billion, which is double the amount of federal funding that we spent in the most recent school year.
Oh, I like that too. Did you see she needs 2,300 per student to have hand washing and to have masks and to have I don't know what the thing she listed under. Pardon?
Gold-plated masks.
Right. Yeah,
feel
exactly.
Good.
Yeah.
Pretty.
Right. Anyway, so that made me laugh. 2,300 per student. You have to have that, of course, right? Anyway, but then you also tweeted about this, Corey. That's what I have next on our link list.
Oh, yeah, of course I did. I tweet about everything. But, I mean, they're threatening safety strikes. And my main take was just what I said earlier, that if they strike, give everyone a voucher. Let them take their freaking education dollars elsewhere. It doesn't belong to the school. If Walmart strike, employees strike, you can take your money elsewhere. If teachers strike, you should be able to take your children's education dollars elsewhere.
Right. So, and the whole reason
be able to do that, they should be able to do that. They should be able to, exercise that, freedom of speech and be able to, call for whatever they want. Only if people aren't on the hook, if families aren't on the hook, they need to be able to take money elsewhere.
And the only reason we're talking about this is because it's supposedly too dangerous to go back to school in certain places, I guess, without Randy Weingarten did say, in Montana, they opened the schools and it's okay there because I guess the virus is not bad. So she was making distinctions, which by the way, Betsy DeVos does too, in distinctions between high COVID school areas and low. But then we came across this Gallup poll today, which said, there it is. Look at this. That's their title, K-12 teachers. But if you scroll down, what you actually find out is that they compared it to regular workers. It's 57% of teachers say they are very concerned, compared with only 21% of all other workers. Okay, so that's it. Yeah, you got it highlighted there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in other words, I had this, I had this fantasy to go interview the people who are like protesting in DC. We'll talk about that a little later, but like kind of saying like, yeah, excuse me. Oh, you're putting that body bag to talk about how if you have to go back and teach again, you will be, you'll die from COVID-19. Yeah. By the way, were you in at the grocery store today? Or how, oh yes, I was there buying, pineapples. Like, anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah,
so
I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons why there's these divergences. One is just a lot of the other workers have already returned to work, right? The grocery store workers, the daycare, childcare workers, they've already returned. So there isn't all that aura of, what's going to happen, whereas the teachers haven't returned to work yet. So maybe that's why they're more concerned about it. But also there have been studies that look at the risk tolerance of different majors in colleges, and education majors tend to be much more risk averse than other majors in colleges, which suggests that teachers in the profession may be more risk averse than others in the other.
I'm sure they would say, "Oh, we have to be, kids are dirty, and we have to be around the whole classroom full of kids. We're not in some office, sitting somewhere at a, by themselves at a desk, So we're around a bunch of kids. Oh, really? What about retail people who are around hundreds of people a day? If you're a checkout person somewhere at a drugstore or some sort of supermarket.
Well, yeah, and it's not the same people every day throughout the day, right? It's rotating people throughout.
Exactly, not just 100 people, hundreds of people, but different people every day. Exactly. So anyway, the idea that this revealed a lot. Like I'll tell you something else. It's also probably true that the unions are telling the teachers to be afraid, right? I mean, that's part of what Randi Weingarten's presentation was all about. It's like, be afraid, please be more afraid. Anyway, so go ahead. So let's move to the locals, Corey.
Let's check it out.
So look at this. This is Memphis teachers staging a die-in.
Oh man, here we go. Oh yeah, there's been tons of this.
You want to scroll down? Show them the photo.
So check it out.
Look at that.
So they're laying on the ground.
Yeah, they're dying.
I mean, isn't it dangerous to be doing this in the first place? But what good is an education when you are dead? I mean, I hadn't seen this one yet. So this looks like, Memphis. The one that really caught my eye was DC. I mean, I'm here in DC, and they pulled one of these.
Oh yeah,
they put body bags out front of the school system offices. I mean, they're actually trash bags. They're not real body bags, and there's not real people in there, obviously. But look, if you scroll in, you can see "Rest in peace, favorite teacher."
Oh, that's right.
You can prevent needless death. Did we see any other sector of the economy doing anything like this? I haven't seen it anywhere else. Rest in peace, killed in the line of duty. So, comparing themselves to soldiers dying in war, essentially. And there were some responses to this. One person from, I think he's a Reason journalist, actually. No shortage of drama teachers here. At this take, I thought that was quite interesting. And here's some more. Noah Polak. Those are garbage bags. DC needs smarter teachers. Okay, time to fire. Oh, comfortably smug went out with this. He's pretty much saying, okay, if you want to do this, then hire someone else. Reminder about the DC Public School Teachers Union. He's saying that they're corrupt, and that there was a past president of this association that was sentenced to 9 years in prison for embezzling around $5 million back in 2004. I hadn't known about that one yet. And then here's just another take. I mean, there were several of these quote tweets where people were just like, what the heck is this? Come on. It's cool. He says, again, similar to comfortably smug, strip them of their salaries and benefits and give the money to the grocery store workers instead. Exactly. And look, my take is, if you're scared to go back to work, no one should be able to force you to go back to work. No way. You shouldn't be forced to do anything in life, but I shouldn't be forced to pay you to not work. And that's the difference here. With Walmart, if a Walmart employee didn't feel safe, I'm sure there have been people in grocery stores that have quit their job if they're afraid, but they find a job elsewhere, or they don't get the force you and me to pay for them.
Yeah.
That's the main difference here. And
so let's go to
crazy.
Right. So then let's go to the New Jersey link if you have that there. This one I thought was particularly interesting. It's my state, by the way, and I just wanted to point. This is a teacher group, which it says teachers and parents. I haven't seen receipts from the teachers union paying checks to this group, but It is my belief, put it that way, that this is a teacher union financed group that are opposing the school reopening in New Jersey. And for those who don't know, New Jersey was hit really hard early with COVID-19. I am not defending the governor, Phil Murphy's handling of COVID-19. For starters, New Jersey has the very single worst per capita fatality rate in the nation. More people divided by the population have died from COVID-19 in New Jersey than anywhere. He did things like sent COVID positive. He ordered nursing homes to accept COVID positive patients. So it's been an absolute disastrous handling. But that said, New Jersey was hit early, and now the state is pretty much over it. There really are cases that are ending all throughout the state of New Jersey. Look on any national chart of current infection rate, you'll see New Jersey's not even on the list anymore. New Jersey's basically well off anybody's list. It's basically asymptotically heading down to zero. And yet you have, even in this state, teachers saying, oh, we can't possibly work because of COVID. And that was the very take that Dale Chu had on a video that he did for Choice Media, which was a Story of the Day video. And I wanted to have you hear what he said.
My name is Dale Chu, president of DC Strategies, social distancing from Denver, Colorado. This is my colleague,
Kellen.
And our Choice Media Story of the Day is
New Jersey teachers' parents kick off week of action to oppose schools reopening.
This week, a group of parents and teachers in the Garden State have started demonstrations and lobbying against schools reopening this fall. The governor has previously said that schools should have some form of in-person learning, but that remote should certainly be an option for parents who want it. What's happening in New Jersey is a microcosm of what's happening across the country. Parents are understandably concerned about the safety of their students should they return to school. If Kellen, for instance, was attending school in Mississippi, I would totally get it, given the high levels of positivity in that state. But New Jersey, one of the lowest positivity rates in the country? This choice between in-person and remote is somewhat of a false choice. Really what we need to do is make sure that there's options for parents so they can decide what's best for their kids.
She totally stole the show, by the way, and I told Dale that in a tweet. I like how she waved to it in the middle of it. She kind of was done with her part, but she was like, just wanted to check in to the audience. Anyway, he makes the point. Go ahead.
And did you see what's going on in Massachusetts? Their union, the Massachusetts Teachers Association, where the official name is, they just struck a deal with the district. I don't have any tweets pulled up on this. I just thought about it because it just happened recently. They just struck a deal with the district to reduce their 180-day student learning requirement to 170 days instead, so reduce it by 2 weeks. And their argument is that we need to, time to plan to reopen the school. So it's not just that.
Why couldn't they add those 2 weeks onto the end of the year, Corey? Why couldn't they just add those 2 weeks onto the end of the year after they're planning?
They could have done that, but they reduced it by 10 days. And it's not just that the schools aren't reopening physically. They're doing it remotely, and then they're saying, by the way, we're not going to even require the teachers to do the remote stuff because we need time for planning things. What have they been doing since March?
Right, exactly. And Randi Weingarten mentioned Massachusetts in her presentation and kind of applauded and praised them for all that. Anyway, but you have, and then you sent me some tweets, Corey, about, I guess, 10 jurisdictions.
Yeah, so there's 10 different teachers unions at least that have partnered up with the Democratic Socialists of America. These are teachers unions from places such as Milwaukee, Oakland, Los Angeles, Boston, the state of Massachusetts, Racine, Little Rock, St. Paul, Chicago. So a bunch of different cities. They teamed up with the Democratic Socialists of America, and they have their big day of resistance coming up, is what they call it, on August 3rd, where they're going to list a bunch of demands before the schools reopen. And here's just 4 of them. One of them is the police-free schools, and I have mixed feelings about police-free schools. But look, it should be that decision should be in the hands of the individual families, not the teachers' unions making unilateral decisions for all these different locations. But then what's most ridiculous is they're calling to ban new charter schools, ban private school choice, ban standardized testing. And I don't even like standardized testing, but you can see what this is. This isn't about the safety of the students.
It's a laundry list of everything in the world that we want. And we'll just say it's all the virus made us have to advocate for all this stuff. Because of the virus, we can't have new charter schools. Because of the virus, we can't have cops in the schools. It's absurd. It's connecting these two things it's so laughably non-relevant to the reason you're allegedly advocating this.
Yeah, I mean, they're overplaying their hand. If they would have just said, we need more money for safety stuff, they could try to make the argument that we're not holding the children hostage, essentially. But look, they just had to go and throw in the police-free schools, the ban.
I know that, right.
They had to throw in the standardized testing bit. And I don't even like standardized testing, but come on.
This is what I'm talking about at the stridency. It seems as if in this era, where this is a microcosm, or to some degree of where the country is moving anyway, where both segments, that appears to be increasingly two segments of the American population politically, and they are becoming increasingly unable to speak with each other. But anyway, so let's go to so speaking of politics, Joe Biden held a press conference. He's not held one. I think I didn't read this anywhere. I'm just assuming. I haven't seen him hold a press conference in months, in something like 3 months at least. But anyway, he did. He actually went. But I mean, you can see that other politicians, governors, and President Trump has been holding press conferences. Sometimes they have masks, sometimes they don't. But even, Andrew Cuomo, through all this, has been having press conferences, even though the reporters are socially distanced, et cetera. So finally, Joe Biden said, well, I guess maybe everyone else is, Cuomo, all these other people holding press conferences. I guess maybe I should. Okay. So he had one. And I thought he generally did better than I expect. I sort of think his mental capacities are waning. That's my personal opinion. I'm not a psychologist, but I thought he generally did better than I expected, except for the part about education. He was asked a question in particular about that, and I thought it was his worst moment of the entire event. So here that is.
What do you make of how schools are considering all this? The president's considering, or has said he would withhold federal funding from states or school districts that don't reopen, or that don't reopen. I mean, you must have thoughts on all this.
Oh, I do. I've laid out, in the interest of time, we'll get you a copy of my school reopening plan, what I think is required in order to do that. There's some circumstances you can do that, but you have to make significant investments to do that in order to provide for protective gear, in order to provide for social distancing, in order to have testing and tracing and all those things. It's possible, but it's a significant investment, and it requires the certainty that teachers as well as students are going to be protected. And where you're in a high intensity area where there's a lot of COVID, it is not a good idea. Evidence the fact that, rhetorical question, I'm not expecting you to answer it. Do you think the president all of a sudden decided not to go to Tallahassee because he thought it was in the interest of the public? He decided, Jacksonville, Florida. I'm thinking of the capital. To go to Florida, to Jacksonville? Well, because even the Republicans down there said, we don't want you doing this. We don't want you doing this. They're just, it's a mistake. And so I think that there are guidelines that have to be made much more specific by the CDC. They should let the scientists speak.
Okay, so here's what I was going to tell you before the show, Corey. So first of all, you notice how Biden smiles halfway through the question when the reporter's asking the question? I think what Biden is thinking then is, I'm going to do this gotcha on Trump about the part about the Jacksonville being canceled.
Tallahassee. You mean Tallahassee?
So, right. So he's like, because Randi Weingarten did the same thing in her speech, by the way, yesterday for the AFT live stream. So I think when he was asked that, he's like, I'm going to get him on this Jacksonville thing. And then he says Tallahassee. He, I guess, didn't remember it was Jacksonville. He says Tallahassee. Okay, I get, any of us can get a name of a city wrong. But then the part I found more interesting was he went on to say that the criteria, the directions, the recommendations from the CDC have to be more specific. Because I guess his point is that the CDC wrote COVID-19 school preparation recommendations that were absolutely too ambiguous and vague. They should be, they were terrible. They didn't do anything. They need to be more specific. Then he switches to a different talking point that contradicts the point he just made. He says, because he just triggered this idea but we need to trust the scientists. We need to listen to the science of the scientists. is who we really need to listen to. You mean like the ones at the CDC, Joe Biden, who just wrote that document, the CDC document about school preparation that you just 3 seconds ago said was not specific enough. So in one soundbite that was 100 seconds long, which everyone just saw, he not only confused Tallahassee with Jacksonville, but he, in, I would say, maybe 20 seconds or so, said both we should trust the scientists and do what they say, unless they're from the CDC. Because that's like the part of the Trump executive branch. And so we're going to, I guess, say that one little group of scientists we should not listen to. We should just listen to all the other scientists. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I thought it was no one else. I didn't hear anyone else make that point, by the way. So I wanted to make it on random assignment. Well, anyway, what did you think about what Biden said?
Didn't the CDC director himself say that we should reopen the schools?
Maybe.
I think I saw a tweet or something going around on that where the CDC director himself said that we need to reopen the schools. And he says, the benefits of reopening outweigh the costs. And I think that's not a nuanced enough approach because it depends on the particular location, right? And this is what you've been saying all along, that in places that are safer right now, maybe it's better for those areas to be able to reopen. Whereas if you're in a hot spot, maybe you do more of the online learning.
Anyway, but speaking of Joe Biden, we had a late-breaking Biden update from our friend Max Eden.
Yeah, this is interesting.
Oh, my goodness. Here, this one's cool. Look at that. It's from today, everybody. I should give my breaking news sound effect. Okay.
Biden supports school choice? What are you talking about, Bob?
Wait. Let's read that. What's the subheadline?
Biden opens the door for school choice. The candidate's child care tax credit would finance promising experiments in education. And so what I think this is you pay for child care services and you get up to a 50% tax benefit for those particular expenses. But I think the argument that Max makes here is that, well, schooling is kind of like childcare. So if you're at an elementary school, does that qualify for this? It could be, but from what we've seen from Biden before, I think the way that he would implement this would be to, just keep public school funding the same. Don't let those dollars follow the child, and then create this new tax benefit. While holding the school districts harmless. I just can't see how else Biden would be able to, with what he has said against school choice before, actually be for a true tax credit program.
So to quote the great Max Eden, he writes, the Biden campaign promised to extend a refundable tax credit up to $8,000 to cover child care expenses for kids 13 and younger, as long as a family makes below $125,000 annually. They would be eligible. Meanwhile, while Biden certainly doesn't intend for his proposal to underwrite a mass exodus from traditional public schools, he writes at the end of the paragraph there, it's hard to see how regulators could make a credible distinction. Wait a minute, this money's for childcare, not education. Hold on here. Like, you imagine them like walking into some sort of a child. They're like, that kid is learning over there. That's not allowed. That's siphoning money away from the traditional public schools. This is just supposed to be childcare going on in this room. Johnny's got a book. Look at that. He's reading Dr. Seuss or something. Get that book out of his hands. You're siphoning. And they're like,
right.
Can they go play in the playground? They're like, play in the playground? That's siphoning money away from PE classes in the traditional public schools. Make them come back in and sit down. They can't do. This is just childcare. They can't be exercising.
The reality is schooling in America and in other countries, a large part of it is large part of the benefit is childcare for your children while you go out to work each day, and everybody kind of knows that. So it is interesting, and you make a good point that if it's education, are they going to come in and step in and try to rip these families?
We have to defund the police. This will be like a new squad that goes into. They're like the Monopoly Protection Guard or something that enters the daycare centers and like, wait, is he eating over there? That's Johnny's got like a hot dog. Johnny's got like a hot dog. They're like, wait a minute, that's siphoning money. Johnny is siphoning money away from the cafeteria in the public school. Have him hand that hot dog back.
I mean, have you seen what's going on in Arizona, California, and Austin already? This reminds me of that, where in Arizona, at least, there are 3 school districts where, according to the state's kind of executive order, I think, you can't reopen the schools till at least August 17th. It'll probably be pushed back further than that. And we talked about this on a couple episodes ago, where they're calling it childcare, and they're charging families on top of what they already paid through the property tax system in the same elementary schools.
Yes.
And so all of a sudden it's okay if you call it childcare and if you're not doing the learning part.
Just don't learn anything. Don't learn anything. That way you're not siphoning money away from the traditional public school. And don't eat anything, because that would hurt the cafeteria workers in the public schools. And don't exercise. Just sit there. I think they just have to sit there and not move the kids. Then it's childcare. This is my analysis of how it is. Anyway.
So I got an update from California.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a couple episodes too, where there was Senate Bill 98, which blocked families from taking their children to charter schools and allowing those education dollars to follow the children to the charter schools in this year, which essentially rewards bad schools for losing students and harms good schools for taking on new students. One school in particular in California, a charter school, had already admitted 500 students, and they just announced that they had to put them back on the wait list because they just found out that because of this new legislation, the families wouldn't be able to take their children's education dollars to those charter schools, so they didn't have the money to be able to educate these 500 additional students. And now families in California are fed up with this new rule, and they're finally taking it to the courts. And they're suing California, the state, over school funding changes, which they're arguing that it's not allowing them to have an equitable education because these are disadvantaged students who would have otherwise been able to take their education dollars to this charter school. It's just this stinking bill from earlier this month in July was passed to protect the status quo and to protect the lower quality schools.
So I didn't look at this story too closely, but this is the school choice advocates who are initiating the lawsuit. These are the choicers suing, I'm guessing, right? Which what I was about to say, that means I guess they have to go before California judges, and what odds will they have in that endeavor?
Yeah, who knows? But at least someone's sticking up for these families. Who knows how lucky prosperous they'll be, and if they'll actually win in the courts. It's not clear yet, but this just came out I think today. But yeah, families are now suing the state. People are going crazy about it on Twitter. People were going crazy about it, calling the state legislators when they were voting on this late June. Legislators didn't listen. They still passed it anyway and protected the status quo, the schools that are losing their students. So I'd recommend going and looking at my colleagues Aaron Smith and Satya Marar. They wrote about this in the Orange County Register. Their title of their piece is "California is Rewarding Failing Schools and Punishing Those Attracting Students." And that's exactly right, that if you lose a bunch of students, you still get the same funding level. If you gain a bunch of students, you still get the same funding level. So what does that mean? Good schools, the schools that attract new students, particularly the charter schools, they don't get any additional funding for serving new students. So they're just not in a financial position this year to take new students because of this one particular bill.
Yes. All right. So moving on, I don't know if you've been reading the papers at all, Corey, or gentle listeners and viewers, but race has been something of an issue in 2020 in America. I'll tell you, my point of view is, I guess maybe it's old fashioned. I believe judge people as individuals. Don't judge them by their group affiliations, whether it's race or gender or otherwise. Judge people as individuals. OK, I sort of thought that was kind of an agreed upon principle. Anyway, the New York Times seems to be changing that with what this is. It's an introduction of a new podcast called Nice White Parents. This is judging people by the color of their skin, according to me. And as you see there, it's from Serial Productions. It's basically, it tells a story. Well, we can read a little bit there. Let's see. Well, it says in the preview clip, A journalist noted findings of a new school that was supposed to open up near a housing project back in 1963 and how white parents urged the Board of Education to open it up near the white neighborhood to integrate white children with children of color. However, when the school eventually opened, none of the parents living in the projects enrolled their students. I guess what the parents of color chose to not enroll anyway, even though it was supposed to be this integrated school. So part of it is they're going back to 1963 for coverage of, redlining aspects of education or something. The whole thing has, I think is not, again, I think like judging people by race is problematic, to use a term of the left. But if you go to the Fox story, there's a response there about the New York Times backlash. There it is about this podcast when a major news outlet unapologetically embraces racism from Senator Ted Cruz, a man who has had the good judgment in the past to retweet Corey DeAngelis, I might add. Also, who actually sat and watched one of my documentary films, by the way, in person. I was there too. He and I were both there. Anyway, the point being, I don't know. All this stuff makes me a combination tired and sad. And let's see this. Go to some tweets too about this. If you see the next link.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of backlash from people like Allie Beth Stuckey. She said this is not only incredibly bigoted, it's also so ignorant. Anything to protect the corrupt teachers unions. And I think the reason that there was so much backlash here, just to make it clear for the listeners, is. Look, the New York Times tweeted this out that, if you want to understand what's wrong with our public education system, you have to look at what's arguably the most powerful force in our schools, white parents. So they're arguing the problems of the education system.
It's racist to judge people by this color of their skin. I know I said it already.
I mean, they're saying that the problem with the education system is white parents, but what Allie's kind of getting at here is that, look, you're just protecting the system from the true problems of the system, which is monopoly power and not allowing students to escape that system through compulsory funding of those systems instead of funding the students directly. And that's what causes the problems, right? If you can't vote with your feet to go elsewhere, that's the main problem with the education system. And then also, look, if it is, if there is some racial dynamic that's causing problems in the public school system, why would you trap families and trap students to send their children into that system that with what I'm expecting is kind of them to be talking about how there's, redlining like you were talking about.
Our friend Kayla Svedlin is great on that subject. Why would, this system is so racist, then why am I trapped here?
Yeah, why trap families into that system? Let them go. Why are they missing the main point here, which is to, allow people to escape the system? So Ben Shapiro had something to say about this as well. Calling them racist, essentially. Okay, I'll just read it. This is what Ben Shapiro said. Disintegrationists are now claiming that if you are a good parent who wants to educate your child in the best possible way, you're inherently racist because you're exacerbating racial inequality. This holds only if you are white, he says, which is kind of the thrust.
As if whites are a monolith, or blacks are a monolith, or Hispanics or Asians or anyone else are a monolith. It's all just so absurd to me, and
well, I mean, I think the major point here is, look, it's not like people and parents aren't the problem with the education system. Parents want best for their kids, and they're going to do whatever it takes possible to get the best for their kids. Regardless of the race of the parents.
It evokes an old meme.
System that does not allow families to have options. And when you're trapped into a particular system that's not serving you, that's a problem, whether it's the school system or any other industry. If there's a monopoly, that's the problem.
It evokes an old sarcastic and absurdist meme, which said, if you're a white parent who reads to your toddler, you're increasing the achievement gap. Like, that's wrong to help your child learn if you're white, because that helping the white kid is increasing an achievement gap.
Well, I mean, we're seeing the same kind of argument with the micro schools here, and it's not as much to do with race, I don't think. But we've seen articles in the Washington Post twice now within the past week or two. We've seen Texas Tribune, Salon doing articles on this, and Good Morning America did a segment on this, where they're all arguing that micro schools, families going outside of the government school system to try to figure out how to homeschool their children within the homeschool community, they're saying that this is going to lead to inequities, but they're not seeing the obvious solution, which is to fund the children directly to allow them to escape that system that they're trapped in, to allow them
Black and Hispanic parents support the policies you just described. They don't want to talk about this, and something tells me this New York Times podcast is not going to make much discussion.
Maybe they will. Maybe they'll talk about charter schools or something, but I'm not putting too much weight into it because they didn't really hint at equal opportunity or anything in their description. But hey, maybe I'll be surprised, and I'm looking forward to listening and seeing what they have to say.
All right.
And
your piece next, Corey.
We have a big update. I think I was the first one to break the news on this, but Rand Paul circulated to his contributors through an email. I don't even think you can find this online right now, but here it is. He is calling to allocate existing federal education funding directly to families. He was talking about Title I funding, which is the major line item when it comes to federal education expenditures. And here's a couple of quotes from Rand Paul that were in that statement. He says, "Parents must have the power to decide what is best for their children and their families." I think he's been listening to us every week, probably. And here's another one similar to what we've heard from Trump and others and us since we've been talking about this each week. If we're forcing more people to school at home, why shouldn't they see funding come to them? Right. And so Rand Paul hits the nail on the head here. Is he talking about? Did you say he's talking about voucherizing Title I is the term that we've used in the past? It's Title I, the program for low-income families that normally goes to districts designed for schools. He's saying give that Title I money directly to parents? Yeah, so that's what he said in the email. At least he specifically referred to Title I funding, which is most of federal education funding. And if he's going to do that, I think the way to do this is to target the funding to lower income families, because Title I funding at least is supposed to go to lower income communities. That's kind of the point of Title I. So if this does become voucherized, I think states should make the wise decision to have these dollars actually go to low income students. It could be open to everyone, but make sure that it's highly prioritized to lower income families so that we're not seeing some, redistribution going to higher income families. I would argue, make it open to everyone, but then just make it much more targeted, much higher dollar amounts to the least advantaged families. And I think, Rand Paul didn't really talk about too much of the specifics here, but I think the main idea is captured by these two quotes. Look, the schools aren't reopening, help families out. And I would say primarily these lower income families and also single parent households who are really going to have trouble if schools don't reopen in the fall.
Corey and I are both fond of making a distinction, which a lot of other people don't make, which is a distinction between public money and private money. So he's actually talking about public money going to parents and families. But other kinds of programs called tax credit scholarship programs are not public money. They're private money where a private person makes a contribution to a scholarship organization, and then that private organization gives money to families. Well, that's what this next thing is about. This is basically the Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina has proposed something called the School Choice Now Act, and this could create, in whatever states choose to participate, scholarship organizations, in other words, that could receive federal tax credit money. So individuals and corporations, in lieu of a certain amount of taxes, could donate money to these organizations and states. But private organizations could then give money to families. Well, this is an idea that's a bill in Congress. What I was surprised to find out is that local TV stations are starting to talk about this, even regular local TV stations. I've never seen this in 10 years in this space, Corey, are starting to talk about, hey, maybe this tax credit scholarship could help families and, pay for the education of their kids. So a San Diego affiliate produced a story just like this.
Yeah, check it out.
It's called the School Choice Now Act. Essentially, if parents don't like what their child's public school is offering, they can have access to money to pay for private school or even hire a teacher inside their own home. Some say it's a win-win, others disagree.
If schools do not reopen, The funding should go to parents to send their child to public, private, charter, religious, or homeschool of their choice.
President Trump made those remarks Thursday, saying the School Choice Now Act would make funding available to families who are searching for an alternative form of education. Nationwide, school staff as well as students have struggled with distance learning. Many families are now looking to homeschool, create student pods, hiring their own teachers, or send their child to a private school. But some can't pay for it, which is where the School Choice Now Act comes in. Introduced by 2 Republican senators, it would allocate 10% of emergency education aid towards scholarship granting organizations. In turn, families could apply for a portion of that money and be given potentially thousands of dollars per child.
This is just saying that 10% of those funding, the funding that's already going to be allocated to education, have that tied to students and tied to their individual families' choices to allow them to get back on track this fall.
Corey DeAngelis is the director of school choice at the Reason Foundation. He says the bill will lead to better equity by giving all families access to whatever form of education they want. And for those staying within the public school system, he believes they would benefit as well.
Competitive pressures lead to better outcomes for those children as well, because the public schools start to think about what they need to do in order to keep families from leaving.
But some argue lawmakers should focus on the public school system first, saying it's been underfunded for years.
Before we are carving out special programs for private schools, we need to properly fund the public school system that educates 90% of the kids in this country.
Troy Flint with the California School Boards Association says lawmakers are trying to slice up a pie that's already too small, adding they need to spend more time understanding the issue.
I don't know if a relief package is the appropriate time to wedge in what is a major social policy change, because this bill, if it passes, is going to be rushed through.
The School Choice Now Act would be temporary. In other words, the money used for these scholarships or vouchers would be considered a one-time emergency type of funding.
Oh, wow. That guy came right back at you, Corey. You wouldn't have known what to say. He said we've never properly funded public education.
Oh, you want to look at California's numbers? Boom, I pulled it up. Dude, every single decade, California has poured more and more money. And I will say this is current expenditures. It's not even total. So add like 20% to this. But look, every single decade since 1970, there's been a inflation-adjusted increase per child in the public school system of 129% in California. Same thing that we've seen on the national level. It's completely ridiculous. And look, the funding doesn't belong to the dang school system. The funding belongs to the children. Allow them to send their kids to private schools too. So this is just more protect our monopoly crap coming from the other side.
Look, I just am delighted they ran this story at all. I mean, that normally that would never even happen. I mean, a year ago, they would have never run that story, even with the same Tim Scott bill.
I want to clarify, though, that when I was on that segment, the expectation was that that School Choice Now Act was going to be included in the next stimulus bill. Now it's, from what I've heard most recently from Education Week, is that that's not going to happen, and that $70 billion through the what is it called, the HEALS Act or something, the Republicans' proposal right now, which is $70 billion for K-12 education. 10% of that, instead of going to the families, they're talking about at least having it go to private schools, which I think that's the wrong way to go. I mean, it's better than having all of the funding going to the public schools. I think it should, be equitably going to wherever the students are going. But I would rather have that money go to the parents, which is what they were talking about just like last week when this segment aired. So it's all kind of up in the air right now. But I just wanted to clarify, because when I was talking in that clip, there was different information than kind of what's being spoken about, at least on the Hill right now.
Okay. So then on some anti-school choice news we have as well, right? From North Carolina.
Yeah, so this is North Carolina. Oh my goodness. The unions are fighting pretty hard to rip out low-income students' scholarships from them in North Carolina. There's the Opportunity Scholarship Program here. Over 12,000 low-income families are using this. In order to even be eligible for this program, you have to be you can only earn up to 133% of the free or reduced lunch program, which is, just for some clarity, that's for a family of 4 in 2019, that's about $63,000 per household. So if you make any more of that for a family of 4, you aren't even eligible. So they're fighting to rip these kids out of, and rip their scholarships out of their hands, during a time when they need options, more than ever. And they're, are making crazy arguments such as, we need public dollars to go to public schools, which might sound good to the other side until you think about it for more than a second, because we have so many programs where the public dollars go to private institutions such as food stamps. Are they calling to get rid of food stamps and to force families to spend their food stamps at government grocery stores? I don't think so. With Pell Grants, you can use them at private universities, pre-K programs. You can use them at private providers of the service. Social Security dollars are quote unquote public dollars. They can be used at private schools. So this is just a bunch of rhetoric from the other side. And it's an attempt to protect the monopoly system. I mean, they sat there and talked about how they don't want to. They actually made the argument that school choice is siphoning away money from the public school system in North Carolina, whereas the vouchers are only less than half the amount of what they spend in the public school system. It's only about
always what it is, right? They never fund the alternative to the public schools anywhere near on a per pupil basis. And yet they will still claim that it's wasting money.
They get to keep most of the money for the child who's no longer there. They should be up, celebrating this. If I were to leave Walmart, go to Trader Joe's, and Walmart got to keep 20% or 30, 40% of my funding, Walmart would be happy about that. The K-12 education system here in North Carolina should be happy they get to keep any money at all. The problem is they want to keep 100% of the money. They don't want you to be able to take any of your children's education dollars elsewhere. So
I found interesting in that article too that they sued. This is a 2014 program, the North Carolina voucher program. It had been sued the year later, 2015, but the North Carolina Supreme Court declared it constitutional back in 2015 in a 4-3 decision. Well, what's different now? Well, now Democrats outnumber Republicans on the state Supreme Court 6-1. 6-1 Democrats to Republicans, please, most Democrats support school choice, but the kind that are often in these legal tracks.
Well, you know what, Bob? I mean, the argument they're making here, their main argument, besides we need to protect the monopoly, which isn't even a constitutional argument, they're arguing that the program discriminates on the basis of religion. And they're saying since there's some religious schools you can use the dollars for, that kind of discriminates against certain groups of students if they're not of that religion. But the reality is the program doesn't discriminate based on religion. No matter what your religious background is, you qualify for a voucher if you meet the income criteria.
Espinoza should have answered that. The Supreme Court decision.
That's what I was going to bring up. The Montana program got nixed because they did the same thing. They said, you can use these vouchers for private religious institutions. So I think if North Carolina even becomes successful in doing this and making this argument and nixing the program because of religion, Espinoza set precedent for that's unconstitutional for nixing a program due to religious schools. So they don't have and they're also trying to tie it into the LGBTQ issue like we saw in Florida earlier this year, where they're making the argument that the program discriminates against people based on sexual orientation. That's not true. Whatever your sexual orientation is, you qualify for a voucher. And as we saw in the GLSEN survey from 2017, the national survey that compared children who identify as LGBTQ in public and private schools, they actually say that they feel safer in the private school sector than in the public school sector, and they feel like they're less bullied and they have better mental health in the private school sector. So look,
actually, it doesn't surprise me, but I didn't hear that before. Yeah.
And this is the battle that was going on in Florida earlier, and these were the arguments that they were making, but that didn't work in Florida. I don't think it's going to work here in North Carolina. Florida, after those arguments were made, ended up expanding their program anyway. And look, if anything, what is truly anti-LGBTQ is denying those children the opportunity to have a scholarship to attend a school where they're less likely to get bullied. I mean, in Florida, they had one student using that tax credit scholarship program that had their story highlighted in the Washington Examiner and elsewhere. His name was Elijah. He argued that the program saved his life because he thought about committing suicide in the public school system. Because
some do. And the point I was going to say about that is if you're talking about bullied kids, the last thing you want is a system that forces them into one school only. The argument that school choice could be bad because one of their choices might be a place that isn't welcoming to them is not a good argument against school choice. That's not a good reason to say that's why we're going to force everyone into this one school, even if they're being bullied and harassed and are borderline suicidal or have even tried to commit suicide already. Too bad you're still forced in that one school. That, to me, I've personally encountered students who have talked about the kind of hell they lived through with that kind of system. So the idea that having many choices is bad because one of the choices may be unwelcoming, to me is crazy. But anyway, you tweeted about this. Let me just see the tweets you did on this.
Yeah, so here, I'll bring it back up. But yeah, I mean, it's right. Look at all these other programs. Pell Grants, you can use them at religious institutions. Food stamps you can use for food for religious ceremonies. Social Security you can use at private schools. They're all public dollars. And no one would say that they're discriminating. These programs are discriminating on the basis of religion. Why? Because the main beneficiary of these funds is the individual family. And these programs don't say, oh, well, if you're not religious, you can't have this money, or if you are religious, you can't have this money. They dole out these dollars regardless of your religious identity or background or your sexual orientation or identity.
So I guess we're saying while the North Carolina, go ahead.
And one more thing I want to add from my tweets real quick is that Lily Eskelsen Garcia, is featured in our featured photo on the left right here, the president of the largest labor union in the United States, which also happens to be the National Education Association, she actually said in this press statement for this lawsuit in North Carolina, and I quote, "Private schools are unaccountable to parents and taxpayers. Give me a freaking break. Private schools are directly accountable to."
Yeah, they say that all the time. Please don't act so surprised. They'll say like, oh, because they don't have these public school board meetings. That's what accountability really is, where you can wait in line for 3 hours and get 2 minutes to speak or something. That's true accountability, and then be ignored by the school board.
No, that's not true accountability. True accountability is saying if this school isn't doing what's right for my children, I get to take my money elsewhere. Public schools don't have that. Private schools do.
All right, we're over an hour. We got to speed up, Corey. We're over an hour already.
What else do we need to talk about?
Just yesterday, Governor Sununu in New Hampshire announced scholarships with some of this federal money. The money that, by the way, when Randy Weingarten said there's no federal money, well, that's odd. Seems like the governor of New Hampshire found using some of that federal money from the Federal CARES Act to have, I mean, a 1.5 million statewide, even in a small population state like New Hampshire, is not a giant amount of money, but nevertheless,
at least they're doing some of the money allocating to students. It could have all just went to the system.
It's going to scholarships to private elementary and middle high schools. So that we wanted to kind of shout that out.
Go ahead.
Okay, I think we can skip past it fast, unless you had something else you want to add.
Well, there's another state too that I just found out that we can highlight, which is Colorado, and I'll bring it up now. Colorado legislators are now calling for a special session. Who knows if this is going to actually happen based on the legislative makeup in Colorado, but they're calling to fund the families directly. And they're not only talking about the federal funding, they're talking about all funding that would have went to the public school, state, local, federal, follow the child to wherever they're getting an education. And they're talking like an education savings account mechanism where you can use it for homeschooling services, micro schools, pandemic pods, so that you can actually help families directly get back on track if their schools don't reopen. And so look, I think this would be a good idea.
Micro schools and pandemic pods. We just showed you before how I was amazed to see that the local news had discovered the U.S. Senator Tim Scott's School Choice Now Act. It's covered in the local news. Local news is going crazy with these pandemic pods also in the micro schools. So I was surprised that, in fact, there's a North Carolina has a service where they are actually pairing up parents who want a teacher from over here with teachers who want to teach in homeschooling collectives or pandemic pods over there. A nanny service is starting to add this matching of teachers and parents as part of their sort of matching a business. And so that was happening in North Carolina, and then local news covered it.
Let's check it out. I actually hadn't seen this yet.
As teachers and students return to learning, we're hearing more about alternatives to the classroom. Some parents are worried about their kids falling behind with remote learning, and they want more options for in-person teaching.
Yeah, so they're turning to what's known as micro-schooling. We have reporter Gina Esposito joining us live this morning from Sedgefield Elementary in Dilworth. So Gina, it's really a chance for students to get a little more personalized teaching while reducing the risk of catching COVID.
Yeah, instead of returning to schools like this one right here, even for the first couple of weeks, parents are turning to microschooling. Teachers would come to your home and would do lessons with a couple of kids in your neighborhood who are all around the same age. Now, I've learned that college nannies, sitters, and tutors in Ballantyne has been matching families across our area. Families can choose between a nanny, a tutor, or a teacher. The agency will then match the family with other children in their neighborhood, creating a mini school that would take place at one of the parents' homes.
I just placed a family that lives in Waxhaw. They have a very close-knit community that they live in. There are 4 students that are all in 2nd grade. All families are COVID conscious. It's going to be a mixture of the curriculum that the school is going to do, but then they're going to do extra added value content to their schooling. So extra activities outside that coincide with what the teachers are assigning.
College Nanny says they have 20 vetted teachers on standby as they expect more families will be looking at this option. The teacher is paid through the agency at a rate of around $30 an hour, a cost which can be shared between families. Since the company employs them, families can also pay for the service using child care tax credits or money from FSA accounts. Now, College Nanny says they're seeing a big interest in Charlotte compared to other cities because CMS is such a large school district. They say that many working parents are looking for someone that can be a tutor and can also handle child care. Back to you.
Yeah, it might be an option for some people. Gina Esposito live for us this morning.
They're using the child care tax credits to do this. This is an agency. It's like a headhunter that normally finds nannies for people. How fast could this scale? Corey, if suddenly all these new groups started to be like, hey, we're going to be like the matchmaker between pairing a teacher that we've vetted and interviewed with parents from the same neighborhood, I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was coming.
Yeah, I mean, this is essentially the Uber or Airbnb of education, where you can essentially have an app that connects the provider of the service, like with Airbnb, which is a person who has a household that you can stay in, or kind of like a hotel, and the person who needs the service, someone who's traveling. And you can do that with education too, where you connect the educators with the the children needing an education.
A spontaneous free market solution.
I mean, this is how I think this is the future of education. And I mean, even if we don't get funding for this, I think this is a great opportunity for families who are really seeking options right now. But look, every family should have this option. And there are other businesses that have sprouted up, like unschool.school. Parents decide, educators provide, which is the same idea here. It's kind of like the Uber or Airbnb of education, where it's an app linking educators to students.
Mm-hmm. And then just one more local news piece. I was surprised to see a St. Louis affiliate referring to a micro school explosion. Like this was their term, a regular broadcast station.
They must have saw Fox News last weekend.
Well, I think it might be a Fox affiliate on this one. But anyway, micro school explosion in St. Louis. So let's see that.
There is an explosion in the number of parents looking for alternative education options for their children.
New at 10, Chris Hayes talks with people helping families try homeschooling and microschooling.
There's so much demand from parents exploring different ways of teaching their children on their own that the 2 people I interviewed about this were both traveling to keep up with demand.
Just has been spreading like wildfire.
Sarah Raybon Zoomed with me from her minivan in Arizona. She could barely keep up with families asking about microschooling through a company called Prenda. It's like homeschooling, but where several families collaborate.
A Prenda microschool typically takes place in a home. We have some that are in empty spaces in community centers, maybe an empty room in a church that has space during the week. It's almost like a little neighborhood school. And kind of that return to that one-room schoolhouse, that community school, kids ride their bikes over to it.
She says the goal is to continue having in-person instruction this fall, and then it may be easier to pull off safely because of lower class sizes of 8 to 10 children.
We've seen some amazing results across the state in our rural communities. We have the first micro school on Native American lands in our San Carlos Apache Reservation, and that has just been a huge success for those families.
J. Allen Weston with the National Homeschool Association was traveling California to keep up with demand when I Zoomed with him.
We started getting hundreds and hundreds of calls and emails a day. The thing that that the parents keep asking for, because they're so used to having the schools tell them exactly what to do and how to do it, is they want us to tell them what curriculum materials to use. And we don't believe in a one-size-fits-all sort of curriculum.
Okay, and so yeah, I think you guys get the idea, but it's more of this coverage of micro schools exploding.
I mean, I just want to point out this is a beautiful lesson in spontaneous order or emergent order, whatever you want to call it.
I like that phrase, emergent order, that you
I
use,
mean,
yes.
these are the Austrian economists that came up with these ideas.
Yes.
That, you know, when government doesn't provide something and there's a need there, people will actually do it despite the government not providing it. If people need it, communities and individuals will get together and do it. And we're seeing that with this micro school and pandemic pod movement. And it's a really interesting thing to be a part of and to witness in real time.
Mm-hmm. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, Corey, I guess we have a ranking of states for public education. Now, these kind of lists are, you know, people kind of roll their eyes sometimes, you know, gee, if you, what does it even mean to average out a whole state when virtually every state has a lot of, you know,
problems,
range in terms of better schools and worse schools and in between schools. But if you can try to sort of average them all out, then let's find one overall score for the
Oh, look,
state.
there's a map and everything.
Yeah, they got a map. And I don't know if you haven't seen this, Corey, I would like you to guess. Oh, see, you already blew it. I wanted you to guess what the worst state was. Oh, see, because normally
I think Florida should be the best. No, but see, they already got it all wrong. They must have not controlled for differences in student populations, just like the Urban Institute does. So I haven't seen this yet. Do you know if they what goes into this? Like what?
No, not really, because I think when you just average a whole state like that, there's so much. When you average together data that's so vastly different, you know,
safety.
You know, even there's so many big cities where, you know, you go to Detroit and the schools are, you know, the 1/3 of students still going to traditional public schools are generally going to terrible schools in Detroit. But then you go to Grosse Pointe or some part, you know, not very far from Detroit, suddenly you have much, much better public schools. So to me, averaging such dissimilar things is so fraught with kind of noise in the data that I kind of roll my eyes at all this. But anyway,
and I wonder what the safety rank is. Like, how do you know what public schools are safe? I mean, I don't even think they have like a uniform system of tracking safety at the national level like you have with, you know, NAEP scores. So I mean, and this obviously doesn't control for differences in students. Otherwise, Florida and Arizona would be way higher on the list, and Massachusetts might be.
Always been the case. Some states have vastly higher percentage of parents with college degrees than other states who have much, much lower percentage of parents with college degrees. And so to kind of just pretend like the schools of the kids of those parents are the only difference is, I think, you know, a lot of statistical noise. But anyway, these kinds of things are kind of fun, and people do kind of, you know, sometimes talk about them. So there it is.
Cool. So we had to cover it. Whether it's good or bad, we can tell people to see through the noise.
So as Click and Clack, the Tappet brothers used to say, that's it. You've wasted another hour or an hour and 12 minutes watching either Card Talk on NPR or Random Assignment Safety Dance. I should get my sound effect back.
Yeah, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. That was the best part of the show.
Don't say that.
You can dance if you want to.
All right, well, friends. Okay, so I do think that there would be a clamor for our viewers.
And I want to tell everyone,
keep talking.
I didn't know when I was like, what should we call this? Should we call it, you know, teachers unions threaten strikes or something? You're like, we should call it teachers unions do the safety dance. I'm like, what does that even mean? No one's going to understand what you're talking about. Millennials aren't going to know what you're talking about. And then you showed me the song. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard this before.
Well, the safety dance meeting, we're going to use safety as a way to ask for all kinds of other stuff that we'll claim is all safety related. So if you oppose every single whim of every single demand we can think of, we'll say you're against safety. See? That's it. You either agree with us or you hate safety.
I've seen an interesting the Reason magazine video on this.
Yeah.
I wish I uploaded it today, but I didn't. But
I think you might have caused some epileptic seizures with the cutting between us. And
Hey, it's such a
graphic
good graphic. It's so cool.
Anyway, thanks for watching and listening, everybody, to Random Assignment. And I can't believe it's going to be, Saturday's going to be August 1st already on Saturday. I can't believe it. Depressing. Anyway. All right, Corey. See you later then. See everybody later.
Everyone have a good week. Until next time, that was the Random Assignment Podcast.